All right, welcome YouTubers. This is the 2019 NBA results. I'll try to take my time in this video, being that I don't do a lot of videos on the NBA. There's a chart up on the screen, and I don't know if it's easy or hard to see on like your smartphone, but if you're on a computer, you want to blow it up full scale, full HDMI type. I know the lines are a little hard to see, but the overall result of this season, it was a hell of a ride. Depending on which side of the coin you look at it, it was either a win or it was a loss. For the most part, both my systems at some point in my book, I won. So let me go through this chart, sort of week by week or point by point or element by element, and just see where we sat. It definitely was not what I consider a super successful season, and that it certainly was very challenging. I guess I'll caveat that, all sports betting as an investment are high risk, right? And typically you get some kind of high reward. I'll categorize my experience this season as super high risk and not much reward, right? Minimum reward. So a lot of money bet to win a little bit, which isn't optimal, but still I ended up with pretty good ROI overall, and there's a potential for a little bit more depending on how you do it. So let me get into the chart. I'll talk a little bit. Now this chart comes from just pure covers.com, which is a website that publishes results and lines and stuff like that, sort of spread betting. This is spread betting on the NBA. And, it's not exact to what you might get on your local book, right, depending on when you bet, but it's covers.com, and it's also game time lines, so that will adjust throughout the day in the NBA. If you're in the NFL, it's throughout the week type stuff. And, lines do move a little bit. They don't move a tremendous amount, but X number of games, and it seems like it always works out for me that in the real world, a couple of those pushes becomes wins, or a couple of those losses becomes a push, or a couple of the losses becomes a win, right? So each one of those is a different, if a loss becomes a push, then you don't lose your money, and if a push becomes a win, you win what you would normally win as a percentage, 91% of your bet. And obviously if a loss becomes a win, then you're talking about a huge spread, right, between the two relative to what I'm winning here and what I'm talking about. So it always seems out that, so for some reason or another, covers.com, now it doesn't have to work out that way, but it always seems like there's a few games that are on the cusp that they record a push and I record, a win or whatever it is, something like that. And it ends up, and, sometimes it goes reverse of that, but always ends up that there's a couple bets or, half a real bet. So like, one of my bets, I get back and it ends up being a net positive. Now that being said, in the real world, this chart at covers.com does not have, for spread betting, does not have the payouts. And so I just assume for this chart, I assume minus 110 payouts. But in the real world, you usually get something slightly worse than that. Sometimes you get a lot of 110s in the NBA for sure. You might get a couple minus 105s. You might get a minus 115, a little bit more 115s than you do the others of, being off of 110. And maybe you can even get a minus 120. But you average those all up, because when you win, when you lose whatever you bet, right? And the book keeps it, and they take 91% and spread it out to the winners. But when you win, that payout matters to a certain degree, because you'll win a little bit less or a little bit more money depending on what the payout was. So overall, for a season like in the NFL, I probably end up about minus 112. I know there's no such real thing as minus 112, but if you added it up, your average bet would be minus. NBA this year, well, I can't always do the full year because I don't go through and bet. Usually I don't go through and bet all the games that I normally, even this ring I'm out, you'll see, pretty early. So I don't know what the actual results on the couple lines that I go bet. I usually bet Bovada, which used to be Bodog back in the day, but it's Bovada. Been Bovada for a while, and 5 Dimes is another one that you can take a look at. Now there's plenty of places to go bet. I'm not advocating. I don't get paid by those. They're not my sponsors. They're sort of my partners in crime. They make betting available for me in the United States, and and I live in Florida, so it's not like I live in Las Vegas where I can just go down to the local casino, sports book, and place a bet. So they do me a service and they collect a fee or they make a profit based upon my winnings. Every time I win, they take 9% of my bet, right, and then return me that. Well, take 9% of the loser's bet. When I lose, they take out my whole bet, right? So it is what it is. So that's real world and it usually ends up. And this one I got pretty deep on my normal play, so I did. I guess let me talk about the graph and let me get my cursor going here. So on the x-axis, I have the week of the year, and I started on the 13th of January, and each one of these vertical dotted lines is a 7-day period or 1 week on Sunday, starting Sundays, and we've gone through all the way through what's now April 12th. The last game of the season was April 10th for NBA. This is all regular season stuff, people who are in control, as opposed to two strong teams fighting each other in the playoffs and trying to do lines on strong teams is never good value proposition. So I tend to stay away from playoffs, even though I'll go right into the NBA and MLB baseball. I'm already in it, and to win it, and usually I'm way out of the NBA. But let me talk about that. So in the past, I've done these. I sort of collected money from people by doing sessions, and each week was a 2-week session. So here was the beginning of the first, here's the beginning of the second. Beginning of the third, it's always a little squirrely where the fourth, or usually it's the fourth session, right? I mean, there's this NBA break for not quite a week, but almost a week where I flatline these bets. I mean, nobody's playing. I'm not betting the All-Star game or something. There's no history for me to tell on that team. So, the fourth week, depending on, fourth session, fifth session, and then the sixth session is like a wild card. And the way I stack up with my value and my martingale, I don't run a martingale anymore, but I still analyze it like a martingale, and that I pick teams that I think will cover in the next 3 games. And you would normally in a martingale you would progressively bet, but over the years I determined that I don't win any money on the first games typically, and the second game I usually am right around what I need to break. Even in the third games I usually do pretty good. Not the case in this particular NBA session, so I always have to evaluate. I'm not guaranteed anything. I'm not making thousands of bets. I'm making for the year I made a couple hundred. Second element on the martingale predictions, right? Bets. I call those usually the first game, right? Even though they're actually the second game in the martingale. But if you look at it, I give you the first game, and if they lose that game, then they go to my prime pick, right, or the third game in the martingale. And so that is a little over 100, right? I mean, it's roughly an order of half, because half the teams win and half the teams lose against the spread. The first game I would have had 400, right, plus picks. But that's just a lot to put out there and a lot to bet for something that is at the low end. And I can also scale better when I just use the second or third or second. You could martingale these together. I don't really tell you. I will dictate a strategy for money management and what you should bet. But that's just my dictation. If you want to bet less, so if you ever see my 57% video on this website or YouTube, it's a very, very popular video, and it advocates betting 10% if you're a 57% winner. So that's what I usually do. I take my bankroll and I bet 10% fixed, starting bankroll fixed for the year. But you could certainly do 10% of your bankroll every day and figure that out, right, as a bet, right? And then if you start losing, you bet less. If you're above your starting point, you bet more, and then it sort of expands. Again, martingaling or whatever to presenting expands what it is, and these curves would drop slower, or they drop and rise slower if they're below the starting point, and they drop and rise higher if they're above. So in some cases that would have netted you even more money. But you always need to get out of dodge strategy with these, because net overall I'm a little, I am usually 56, but this NBA I've been making too many bets. So the other thing that the weekly things or the sessions, right, the 2-week periods, I used to go, well, if you win 10%, we stop for that session. And if I put some stop out there, like if you lose $4,000 or $6,000 in my case, I'm betting $2,000 bets here. So if I lose 2 or 3 bets, then I also stop. So that reduces the number of games that you play a year, and then you'll pick it up the next session, right? And if you lose a particular session, we'll try to make it up the next session, that type of stuff. And what I learned over the years is like, well, that works. It's kind of, it depends on when you start and stop and what the session does. But most of the sessions, if you look at the hollow dots here, right at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, typically a couple lost over the session, but a lot of them jump up at least 10% or 20%. Some of them jump up drastically as they go through. Between the red and solid green lines are my net every day here. So that's that's one way to do it. You can do 5% of your bankroll if you're more conservative, but or whatever it is, you just end up using more or less money. And like I said, you can do percentages, you can do stuff. I've done that. I think I did that last year or the year before. Maybe it was at MLB that I attempted to do percent today, and it went on a big spike, sort of like this year did with my first games, and it's like I made over 100%, like in the first week, right? And it's like, well, I stopped and didn't play. I do have a stop gap. My stop gap is, I don't know, 30 to 50% or something like that. When I'm in that zone, it's like, well, just walk away a winner. That's sort of my mantra. I don't try to like double up quite as much anymore, although that's always in theory in the back of my mind. But it's like the way that it is, just take your 30% over and especially if you get in a couple of weeks, that's great. Walk away. Don't need to be an addict if you want to win money. You don't want to make a lot of bets if you're winning money. I mean, because the more bets you make, the more equal games you play, and traditionally time just catches up with you, and you'll end up a loser. So that's a little philosophy in there. Now on the vertical axis is, again, I start with an example of a $20,000 bankroll. You can use any bankroll you want. In particular, I used twice that bankroll for my normal picks, and I used only $5,000 for the first game just to keep me interested. But so I can double up everything on the scale, but it doesn't matter. It's just whatever if you bet $2,000, if you have a $2,000 bankroll or a $20,000 bankroll or a $100,000 bankroll, it doesn't matter. It's all, I am betting $2,000 a game. So as long as your book will take $2,000 or $4,000 or $20,000 a game, right? Depending on what your bankroll set out here is. And of course, don't use all your bankroll. Watch my 57% video, but always keep some in spare because you'll have some decisions once in a while to make. And again, this is a prime example this time where I had to make some decisions. Technically went bust, but then just, to fully fund, I had to reach into my pockets, and eventually it recovered for me. So this blue line that I put halfway out here is just reference because you can't really see these lines too great, but that's the $20,000 starting bankroll line. I've also put a dash line, solid thick blue line here at the 0 mark, right, where you are out of funds, right? You can see there's some activity underneath that line, which isn't great. I didn't put anything above, but obviously the high scale on this is 40,000. That's doubling your money, or 100% ROI. That was not achieved in my systems this year. So just FYI, that's a good. And actually, you can see the minus 14,000 sort of shows there was a dot where I got out there and had to put that much out in the start of a day. So it is what it is. Anything else to talk about on this chart? No, we pretty much covered it. So I will go through the individual results here and what these lines, these jagged lines marking my progress, went. So again, I officially started here. I did this year do something different. I just said, let's just go for it and make all these bets or stop when we're done and not do this session bit, right? And so I gave people an Excel file typically for money. Again, this was all for money this year. On NBA, I gave away my NFL picks last year for free and made 37% plus. You should have been following along. I could have made more, actually, if you'd picked one of them. I had 3 schemes there, but I have a couple schemes here. And I primarily play the dark red line, which is my prime. Anybody that loses the first game gets into my prime. And if you go head-to-head, if you have 2 prime teams that match up on a day, you don't make, in spread betting, you don't bet both sides of the bet. You're just going to lose the VIG, right? And for me, in this, it's always going to be, it's $182 to win one, lose one, based upon. So every time at the minus 110 odds that I have on this chart, it's, if you lose $2,000. If you win, then you're plus $1,818 or plus $1,818. And the other $182 is the VIG, right? So when you pay, you lose. Or when you pay, you pay. When you win, you pay the VIG, and when you lose, you just lose everything. And so the casinos, sport books, distribute money accordingly and keep their 9% net, right? They're hoping to balance the action in theory. So you see that as it goes along, and I've drawn in some lines that cost you $91 per game, because that's, whether you win or lose, that's your expected 50-50. You expect to do 50-50 on these spread bettings. In theory, if you can be a worse than 50-50 picker. I'm usually better than a 50-50 picker. I was definitely better than a 50-50 picker this year, but I was not a 57% picker. That's my disappointment, basically. So as I come along here, it was a very odd. Anyways, what I was getting back to is there's some preseason people that, I didn't really win anything on my prime, but my first game, I think I went 6-2 or 6-1, and you could have just walked away in the preseason before January 13th. Again, I start January 13th because I have my money invested in the NFL. I'm well aware the NBA starts in whenever the hell they start, October, November, but I'll pick it up in January, and I'm gonna work these X number of weeks and try to make some money. Right? That's what we're here to do. So it was odd because I didn't have any picks coming out of the gate here. And as a matter of fact, I picked a couple games here. You can see that the hollow dots, so the dashed lines with the hollow dots, are what I call OOP, out of pocket. In other words, the beginning of the day, I needed to get down to this level, so I started at 20,000, and I picked 2 games. So at the beginning of the day, I had to lay out $2,000 to the sports book, so I had 16 grand in my pocket, and that's what this dot represents. It's important to always know your maximum out of pocket for the year, because it's hopefully less than your bankroll, but it will be in one of these. It won't be in the other, but it was. And then I think I split that game. I win one and lost one on the 2 bets I made that day, so I ended up losing $182. I was at $19,818. I lost $182 on the split, and that's what I mean. So my expected, it's the same matched up with my expectation. And so if I follow this, we have some losses, and where did I win here? Well, this was 1-1 again. But, anyway, anytime you lose the whole day, I'm trying to find an example where I lost. Here's an example where I lost the whole day. So I was up at this point. I was up a little bit. I was up $1,272, and I made a bet, and I lost it. And so that's why the nets equal the out for the day if you lose all the games in a day. I'm not making a tremendous amount of bets in one day. I will later in the year as they stack up, but I usually try to be out there. So the first session, I didn't really have a lot of bets, and I got a little bit ahead, and back and down and up. At the end of the session, I was like net neutral, and then the second session, I really went on this bender right here. And normally on the sessions, I would have capped out here or here, but it kept going down, right? So I kept playing this year. So that was my downfall of not being session-based, right, and putting a stop loss in there. And actually, I know, like San Antonio was kind of a pain in the ass for me. They lost, I think, 12 straight games against the spread, which is like flipping a coin, right? 50-50. Although as you lose each game, you get more of a line for you, so it's actually worse than a coin flip. And it can happen. You can flip a coin and get 11 12 straight losses, but it's not very probable. Anyways, that's an excuse for why I plunged here. There were other teams that lost too, so I went way down. I was down at 6,000. Had to put out there, but then I came back a little bit. We had the All-Star break, and same type of thing. Eventually on this day, I needed to go a little bit deeper than my pocketbook at the beginning of the day, but I did have a good winning session that day, and my wins looked like they were coming back here around March, and then I just went on another plunge. I didn't really analyze why the hell that was. Again, on this day, I was out of pocket, and then eventually my net got below the zero line, right? And I was putting, eventually on one day, now there's making some pretty good bets here, obviously, if there's a big spread between what you started the day and what you ended. But I needed an extra 11,096 in theory on this chart. Again, in my real world, I had experienced 1 or 2 of those pushes a little higher here, so I know I didn't spend the full 10,000 even, because this line doesn't represent real world. It is hypothetical, but I like to be hypothetical because at least you can see my results and go to covers and say exactly what the hell I'm saying. And everybody's experience differs a little bit depending on what their lines are and what the point spreads were and whether you pushed or lost on a given game. So again, I was up, and then your payout degrades from it. So I know at the end of the year, when I quit out at this red star over here, I was plus 3,500 minus the VIG payout difference, and I was plus like 2,800 or something. So I was actually 28. I was actually almost 3 bars higher than this. So I don't calculate that. I don't publish that. But my real ROI is higher. But of course, the ROI, because I needed to expand. Let's just say it was little. It was 28 something. That let's just do it on 30,000, right? Or in this case, I'm doing it on $31,000 of bankroll, and now my ROI changes because it's not on 20,000 bankroll. I needed more money. So that's the way I do it. I mean, you can disagree, you can agree. It doesn't really matter. Anyways, as of this day, I won that day to get off my low point, and it just went on a tear. I mean, life is streaky in this NBA. That's one of the things I hate. MLB is streaky too. There's just a lot of games and a little bit hard to judge sometimes. Sometimes these guys don't give a crap for 3 quarters, right? And there's regular season game that they're playing every other day, sometimes every day in back-to-back cities. It's really tough to say that they'll be professional, right? Who knows? Anyways, I did end up crossing the Mason-Dixon line here and getting above my 20,000. And so this star point here is where I got out. And officially, I was 52 at 45 at that point, a 53.6% winner, whatever you want to call it. Plus 45.36, that's 22% against the 20,000. Against the 30,000, it drops to about 15%. But again, my real world, I was $2,500 above that. I got a $20,000 bankroll. I was double that actually, so I did okay. I mean, I'm just going to say it's 15% ROI, which isn't stellar, not particularly great in my terms, right? But 22% against the 20, and I was not quite. I wasn't double that. If you add 2,500 of this, you get to 6,000, and you can do the math there, right? And then I went down, and I went back up. So the high of the year was actually here. I didn't put out a statistic for it, but it was plus 7,444, and you probably would have been above that, but you would have spent more. And then it dropped back down. At the end of the year, I was just barely over the Mason-Dixon line, right? 62 and 56, 52.5%. I didn't calculate it as 700 or something. Anyways, there's a double dash line. It's a little hard to see, but that's if I lost $91 per pick, so a 50-50 picker. And you can see it drops down, and at the end of the year, it's just under 10 grand. So that's what the net expectation for the world is, and I am leaps and bounds above that, although barely above my starting bankroll at the end of the day. But you should have got out. I'm again, especially after this ride. Once I got above 500, and I was actually a little bit above here, and it popped up, and I said done. There were big wins right in this area. I have big win, boom, done. I was done on this chart, or I crossed it. That's good enough. I'm taking it. I'm taking my 15 or 22%, or really for me it was more like 40%, right? But it is what it is. Done, right? And get the hell out of here. I should have been out of here way before, right? So that's it for my prime picks. Now, how did my first game? Now, I don't advocate playing the first game. It seems to be even more streaky. It's twice as many games. I don't guarantee like that's going to be a winner. That turns out at the end of the year it was just slightly below a loser, but it was a loser, a net loser at 108 and 99 at 52.2%. But the ride was much different. The ride was much more what I would normally advocate as a ride, which is, you came right out. Again, same thing. You bet the first day, and you won, and then boom, boom, boom. So in the first session, I was up over 24. So that's up over 20%, right? And, that's not necessarily good for a year, but it's certainly good to quit or whatever, for at least for that session. Now, it went back down by the beginning of the set, and then it was kind of flat. Then it went up again, and there's lots of spikes. Each one brand new high. I definitely was out by air. And I wasn't betting much money on this anyways. But if you were betting a lot of money on this, you did very, very well. You were 36 and 27, a 57.1% picker. You're plus 11,448 in profit, a 57% ROI, which is a good time to get out just before the break. Now, if you kept with it, plunge down below your starting, and then it went on a rocket ship again. And that's actually the high for in all my systems for the year of 53 and 40, 57.0%, plus 16, 354, 81% ROI. Uh, since I stopped here, I don't know like what the actual is against. I didn't bet them. I didn't go out and look every day to figure out what these teams were, and what I'd get on Bovada or Five Dimes or something. But you have twice as many games. So there's twice as often that you'll get these little increments. And I don't think I was above. I was above. I'll take that back. But it was about the same amount. It was about like 2,200 or something net. I was above this. Then, well, I'll take that back because I'd also bet $500. And some of the games conflict with you're betting one side on the FG, so I have to do a little bit of math in there in the real world, right? That's the problem. That's the problem with my real world one is I'm betting. It's the same account for me that I'm betting, so it's kind of weird to just figure that out, right? But it was a little bit above. There was a push that was a win, and then something like that. So it was plus 18, and then take a little bit off for the big. Anyways, net, you got up. There was a chance to get out here pretty high, and then it dropped back down, and it came back, and it dropped down, like pretty low here. And eventually, on these days, you ended up consuming more than the bankroll, just slightly, right? But really, you shouldn't have been playing anymore. And eventually, it finished strong, and it was just a little bit low, is all I'm saying. Now your net, there's twice as many games, practically, not quite twice as many, but this dotted green line is your 50-50, lose $91 a game, and you ended up almost consuming your entire bankroll. That's where the average person should be, and of course I'm leaps and bounds above that as a 52%. Nothing to crow about. I know you need 52.4 is the standard number at minus 110 odds. You need a little bit better in the real world. Just a slight tag, right, to get 50. I usually go with 53% you need to be. So I didn't really make goals this year, but shoot, it is what it is, right? So I guess it's a win. But you had to dig into your bankroll, and it got really squirrely here. When you're here and you're laying out that, then there's a chance you can lose, and like you were losing. And I don't advocate I advocate sticking with the system and having some faith, but this is a faith check right here. No doubt about it this year. I did not like that one bit. Most of my seasons, if you look at prior seasons and graphs and other sports, I don't really get in a faith checking situation. But I'm like, I already put money in, and I can lose that. I mean, this is the colossal martingale when you get to that table and you lose 12 in a row and you lose all your money about that. But, I'm here to bet. So how did that do against Apple? I mean, the stock market was on a tear this year, or this part of this year. And so Apple, let me go multiple months here. Now, if you bet Apple in the fall during football, you lost your shirt, right? I won money. They lost money at an equivalent rate. But let me just find the 13th of January. I'm not going to do the math here. Well, that must have been, 13th is on Saturday. Say you bought it on a Monday, right? At the end of it, it was $150 to buy. Assume you can buy it $150, and we're now at the 10th, 200. So you're making, I can do that math practically, 33%, right? You're making $50 on 150. So the stock market went apeshit this year and pretty steadily up. So you made, what did I say? 33%. That's better than sports betting, right? It's odd that I get that, but of course you have to be a super predictor in the stock market to get that. Again, my returns are usually good time after time, but yeah, again, high risk, high reward, and that's what it is. So I know this is a long video. I appreciate if you've made it all the way to the end here, but NBA semi-successful. I am going on to the MLB. That's a free XL. Several people have picked that up already. I do have to take a second look at that. I just don't understand now. The MLB is different because it's not spread. I'm not a big advocate. I don't put a lot of money out on it. You can bet both sides, or you can decide not to bet when they go head to head, because you can win money because the payouts. It's all payouts, right? It's all who wins, and it's like a money line, right? It's a money line bet, which is not a spread betting. So otherwise, if I don't hear from you, then we'll go to the NFL, and I'll put my NFL predictably on YouTube again and try to pop out another 40% over those 3 months. So make a little money here. Hopefully I'll make some money, or maybe I'll not play the MLB. I'll see. But anyways, I'm not going to put out a website like I did, and I'm not going to take paid picks. I'm just not interested in the MLB every day. It's a grind. Yeah, the NBA is a grind to me compared to the NFL. My bread and butter that I've been doing for a long time. So, anyways, success, I guess, is what I've said that a couple times. If you have any questions or concerns, put them below, or you can put them below, or you can go to my website, greatdanepicks.com, and get in touch with my email that way, and we can do whatever. I'm busy, but I'm also not busy. All right, so see you guys.